Evil Never Dies, and Halloween obviously just had Halloween Ends come out, which was supposed to be the end of the series. And like we all know, Michael Myers will be back, Halloween will be back. So we're kicking Halloween into overdrive here on the channel, and we're going over the Halloween movie series rankings from the worst to the best. I'd like to think that mine is a little different than a lot of other people's, but we'll go through it all here. And before we get to the list, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe and do all that YouTube stuff because it really helps me out and helps me out know what you want to see. But without further ado, let's get to the list. So kicking off the list here, we have one that some people out there say is a masterpiece and some people out there say is an abomination of mankind. I'm more on the abomination of mankind sort of end of the spectrum here, but that's Halloween 2 from Rob Zombie from 2009. I watched this movie for the first time when my friend had us rent it. We didn't watch the first one. We just went straight into Halloween 2 for whatever reason. I'm not sure why. But this one is all the things about Rob Zombie's filmmaking that are wrong, that are just not good, to put it sort of lightly here. But Halloween 2, it's kind of a mess, and a lot of people out there I know really like it because it does something different with the Halloween franchise, and that's a big theme of the list, is that some things that are different are good, but in this case, the things that are different are like Sherry Moon Zombie coming in as like weird, dreamy Michael's mother kind of stuff, Michael being outrageously violent, not even just like a lot violent, but like egregiously violent in certain cases to where it verges into parody, into sort of cartoonish levels. And so you get that with Halloween 2, and you just get what ends up being a mess in my mind, a mess of a movie that doesn't really do anything as a service. It's not very good, folks. So if you like Halloween 2, more power to you, but it is the worst Halloween movie in the franchise, and I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. Next up, we have what those people that love Halloween 2 would probably consider to be the worst movie in the franchise. We have Halloween Resurrection, and this one comes out in 2002. It has the bait and switch at the beginning of the movie with Laurie Strode, and then it goes into just something that sort of doesn't have anything to do with this, besides the fact that they're in the Myers house filming an internet web series. It is very much a product of its time, and besides just having some crazy scenes and some just not great kills, really. It's like a microcosm of the early 2000s of horror, where you have this insane idea about the internet. The internet is the new thing, and oh, we're web streaming now. So it would be a novel concept today where you're having Michael Myers killing people on Twitch, but in 2002, it just doesn't really work, and the movie itself is not very good. It's just kind of a meh, like, it's a wet fart of a movie. It's not horrific. It's not offensively bad. It is just bad. And so besides having someone fight Michael Myers with karate and just the bait and switch at the beginning is really the worst part about it. You have this promise of like, oh, it's the sequel to H2O. We're going to lead off or go from where that movie left off. And then it just doesn't. And it leads you on and you get Laurie Strode dying. And yeah, Halloween Resurrection is not for me. You can like it. Maybe you'll enjoy it. It might be a product of your time. It might be your first Halloween movie you've ever seen, but not for me. Don't like it. Next up, we have Rob Zombie's Halloween from 2007. I think the biggest thing about these Halloween movies from Rob Zombie is that they didn't actually release them in October. They released them in August. They released a Halloween movie in August. So go figure there. That's an omen of bad things, is when you're going, we've got our movie called Halloween. Let's release it in August. Okay, well, besides that, that's a bit of nitpicking. Halloween is better than Halloween 2. It does take some wild swings. It doesn't strictly remake the first movie. The thing I will give these Halloween movies from Rob Zombie is that the casting is absolutely excellent. You have Danielle Harris returning. You have Malcolm McDowell. You have Brad Dourif. You have plenty of good cast members here. And it does the cardinal sin of, hey, let's take Michael Myers, who is the ultimate evil. We don't really need to give him a backstory. Let's make it so that he was bullied as a kid. Let's just do that. It's a sort of interesting concept, but when you take something that is Michael Myers, who doesn't talk, who doesn't have any emotions, any feelings, anything like that, and you give him those things, it kind of just, it doesn't work. It goes against what John Carpenter wanted with his original character, and I know a lot of these sequels do that, but here it's egregious. You can't have Michael Myers have emotions. You can't have him talk. You can't really have the audience feel for him. If you have a chubby kid getting bullied, that's kind of something that makes you want to feel for the guy, and then he goes out and murders a bunch of people. So Halloween from Rob Zombie, it's a watchable movie. It's way better than his second movie, but it is still not great. It is worth the watch. You might enjoy it, but I really don't think it's that great, and I don't think both of his movies are that great. And you can tell me to watch the theatrical cuts, and I've done that. I've done all the research for this, and they're just still not very good, in my opinion. And so, go figure. But we'll get to the rest of the list after Rob Zombie. Now that we've got those out of the way, we can get to some of the other more controversial picks here. Up next, we have a movie that is, I recently rewatched. I rewatched the 4K of this, and it is upsettingly bad how they really messed this up, because Halloween 5, The Curse of Michael Myers, was made less than a year after Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers, where they were just like, let's get it into overdrive. Cool, boom, make another movie. And so, whereas you see the magic with that Halloween 4, with Halloween 4, you get a lot of that stripped away with Halloween 5. You have Ellie Cornell's character killed off, and she does just unceremoniously killed off, and then it's not mentioned for the whole movie up until the very end. So the wonderful main character, the wonderful main babysitter character from the fourth movie is just killed off and replaced with Tina, in quotation marks, as she is in the credits, the opening credits, which is weird. I don't know why she has quotations around her name. But Tina is just not super personable. She's sort of this party girl, and the opposite of, Laurie and Ellie Cornell's character. And so it's just kind of strange how they did it. A lot of the stuff that Jamie is a mute for most of the movie, so you strip away what makes Danielle Harris's performance in the fourth one so great, and you just have this whole, it feels like it is a rush job, and it feels like a rush job. It feels like there's a lot of stuff missing. And then the most cardinal sin that they commit, they make Dr. Loomis into this asshole, where, I get it, he's gone through a bunch of stuff. He's gotten blown up, he's gotten shot at, he's gotten stabbed, he's gotten whatever. He's gotten beaten up by Michael Myers over every Halloween here. But they make him into just such a huge asshole, and it verges on like he's trying to use a little kid as bait to get Michael Myers. He's that obsessed now? That's not part of the character. That's not where the character comes from. And this movie just makes a lot of mistakes here, and you really just have to it's past the point of like, okay, well, let's give some suspension of disbelief here. It just shows that it was rushed. It loses a lot of the luster of Halloween 4, where you have that atmospheric sort of Halloween vibe. This doesn't really feel like it. It feels like they shot it in Salt Lake City in the wintertime, which is what they did. So, go figure. And then, of course, you have the ending, which comes out of nowhere. And if you watch it with somebody who hasn't seen it before, they're sitting there wondering, who the hell is this guy who the hell is this cowboy walking around trying to kill people? And he murders the entire police force of Haddonfield again for the second year in a row. They must have some really great recruitment people down there to try to get people to go to the Haddonfield police department. But it ends, and they just don't really pick it back up because it takes them a long time to make Halloween 6. So Halloween 5, not very great. Next up, we have Halloween 6, The Curse of Michael Myers. And so if the revenge isn't as good, we have the curse, and we have the producer's cut and the theatrical cut. And I'm just going to lump them both together here, because the differences between the two don't really push it ahead of any of the other movies in the series. They really just make it so that you have a different viewing experience for both of them. So Halloween 6, it should be a big mess, and at points it is. At points it is a big mess, but it is the last of this sort of classical era of Halloween that we have, with Dr. Loomis in the movie as Donald Pleasance playing Dr. Loomis. You have Paul Rudd as a baby, he still looks like a baby these days, but you have Paul Rudd as a baby, and so you have these two different sort of varying movies with varying degrees of good stuff and varying degrees of bad stuff. And so if you really want to get the full experience, you do have to watch the producer's cut and the theatrical cut. The producer's cut is a little less violent. The theatrical cut is more violent to try to get sort of that gorehound audience in there for the when they released it in theaters. But really, at the end of the day, it goes really far off the deep end here with the Cult of Thorns stuff and the the sort of incesty kind of weird stuff that they have in the film. And so you lose a lot of that, and you also you don't have Danielle Harris. And that's the big mistake that they made here, I think, is that Danielle Harris went through this whole process of getting emancipated from her parents because she was too young. She went through this whole legal process, and her only caveat to signing on for the pittance that they were going to pay her was, "Hey, can you pay my legal fees?" And they said no, and so she didn't do it. And the movie suffers because of that, because this trilogy that you have here, that's the late 80s, early 90s trilogy of Halloween movies, you lose the heart of it, which is Jamie. And with Halloween 5, you have her as a mute for most of the movie, and it's still Danielle Harris acting her ass off as a child actor. And then you would have had her as a little bit older here, and you would have been able to see how this affected her and how this whole saga has affected her. And you lose that. And it's really, really kind of, it affects the movie. But the movie is, on its face, better than Halloween 5 because of all the dumb mistakes they made in that movie. But it still doesn't reach that upper pantheon of Halloween movies, whether you watch the theatrical cut or the producer's cut. So check them both out. But yeah, that's Halloween 6. After Halloween 6, we have a controversial one, depending on who you ask. I might have been a little bit too harsh on this movie as it released, but we have Halloween Ends from 2022. And I know a lot of people really didn't like this one. They didn't like the swings that they took. I've thought about it more, and I think it's not as bad as people are saying. It's not as disappointing as I thought it would be. And you have a lot of big swings here with Corey Cunningham, and the plot of the movie focusing more on him than Michael Myers. And I think it works. I think it works really well, actually, now that I've thought about it a whole lot more. And that's the best thing about the Halloween series, is that you can reflect on these movies. And as I was watching Halloween 5, I was thinking, if they released this movie today, people would hate this. People would be saying this is the worst thing in the series because of all the dumb mistakes that they've made and all the character decisions that they've made. So if you're going, oh, well, Laurie is a different character, blah, 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 blah. She's not really that much of a different character from what she was in Halloween 2018 or H2O or Halloween 1978 or Halloween 2 or wherever you see her. She's not that much different. She is older, she's wiser, and she's faced a lot of death and destruction in her life. And so you see that in her character in this movie. Corey Cunningham, while I do wish that this might have been the second movie in the series, I think it would have been received a lot better if you have this as the second movie and then you have Halloween Kills with the final battle stuff. I don't know, but I think it would have worked better as a second movie because it would have been an interesting story. It would have been this sort of, I don't want to call it the Empire Strikes Back for Halloween movies, but if you just have that part where it's seemingly like, oh, Michael might be this evil force that is consuming people now. That's an interesting idea. It's an interesting idea that the town of Haddonfield blames Laurie for all of their troubles involving Michael Myers. It's an interesting idea. It's a movie filled with interesting ideas, but some of those are not as baked well as others, but it's not as disappointing as I thought it was. Coming out of the theater, I thought it was disappointing, but now that I've reflected on it and I've really thought about it, it's actually a good entry in the Halloween series, and it's not as good as some of these coming up, but it's still a good one. So if you're going by tiers, you have tiers here with Halloween or Rob Zombie's Halloween 2, Halloween Resurrection, Rob Zombie's Halloween 1, Halloween 5. That's like the last tier, and then I think I might put Halloween 6 in its own tier, and then you have Halloween Ends, and then the rest of these movies here, because it's flawed, but it's still a very good movie. After Halloween Ends, we get what a lot of people call where the series came back to life. We have H2O, 20 years later. And this one, I know a lot of people like this one, and I was considering putting Halloween Ends above it. I really was, because it's a very formulaic sequel movie. This is like the first legacy sequel that we've ever gotten here. And while Laurie is super badass, it's the fighting with Michael Myers is great. It's just the rest of the movie sort of is a little more bland. Add on top of that they have like the horrific, like absolutely horrific CGI for Michael Myers' mask in certain points. You have sort of weird continuity stuff with the actor that played Michael Myers. H2O is still good. It's still on like a very, very decent sequel in the Halloween series, but it doesn't really raise up to that sort of upper level that I know a lot of people hold it up to. And maybe for me, it's just that, It's 1998. It's a weird era for slashers. Scream had just like destroyed slasher movies. They'd reset what we thought were slasher movies, and so this is sort of a child of that era. It's a reset of the slasher movie genre with influences from Scream and everything else in that sort of era. Thank you, Kevin Williamson, for all of that, for resetting the cycle, because slasher movies move in cycles, horror movies move in cycles, and this is a part of that cycle. It's sort of in that kickstart era where we keep going into the sequel-a-thon of the early 2000s with all the Scream sequels and everything else. So H2O is a lot more like Scream than it is the original Halloween movie, but it's still a decent sequel, and it's still earned a place on this list at right here. Up next, we have Halloween 2, and this sequel, John Carpenter, I know, doesn't like it as much. He said it was one of the most miserable experiences of his life writing the script. He was drunk all day writing it, but this one is terrifying. It's horrifying. It makes you not want to stay in a hospital ever. And Halloween 2 does a lot of good things. It ups the violence, it ups the ante. Michael is a tank in this movie. He takes a lot of punishment. He gives out more punishment. You have what's starting off with a lot of brutal kills. And so you end up seeing where Michael's brutality comes from. It comes from this movie. He's not as brutal in Halloween 2018, 1978. But in Halloween 2, he lifts a lady up by a scalpel. He friggin' burns two people's faces off in a hot tub. There's plenty of other kills in this movie, but he's more brutal, and it does add this sort of weird wrinkle that Michael and Laurie are brother and sister that gets eliminated in the newer movies. But you have a great performance from Donald Pleasance as well. He really turns it up here, and he's probably accepting the paycheck, but Donald Pleasance always brought it, even if he was just taking it for the money. So Halloween 2, really great sequel, really good sequel that sets up what sequels should have been going forward. But it also tied up the series nicely. You could have just ended the series here and done what they wanted to do, which was the anthology sort of. We'll get to that when we get to Halloween 3. But you could have tied up the series very nicely here. Michael is gone. Loomis is dead. Laurie's going off to the hospital or another hospital. But they didn't do that. But Halloween 2, you can view it on Halloween, or you can view it together as a couple, because that's what it is at the end of the day. This is one of the points where the series caps off, and you can just forget about everything else if you don't like that. But Halloween 2, great sequel. After that, we have another controversial pick for some people out there. I know a lot of people hated Halloween Kills, but I really enjoyed it. I really thought it was great. It's a lot like, you can put Halloween Kills and Halloween 2 together, because Michael is utterly brutal in this movie. He is killing everybody left and right. And with some of the stuff, the swings that they took in this movie that didn't really translate over to Halloween Ends, they tease the Halloween, the Michael Myers supernatural stuff because of how he's jumping around and taking a beating and still killing the residents of Haddonfield. But if I know the evil dies tonight is a meme, but this movie it goes deep into that sort of idea about Haddonfield being the evil that actually created Michael, or is Haddonfield, is the people around the ones that created the evil, or is it Michael Myers himself? And it asks that question, and it goes with that along with the great kills and the great follow-up to Halloween 2018. And so Halloween Kills might be maligned by some people that say it's it's just brutal slasher gore fest or whatever, but it's a lot more than that. And I think that might be why people are disappointed by Halloween Ends, is because Halloween Ends does take a little bit to get into, but Halloween Kills starts off right away, and it has the wonderful scene set in 1978 from that. If they made a movie like that might be something that people would be interested in, that goes deeper back into that. But that's not the point of Halloween Kills. It's still a great sequel. I still really enjoy it, and so it has a nice place on the list. Heading into the top 4, we have Halloween 2018. This movie is a revelation. This movie should not have worked as well as it did, and it might not have kicked off the requel era that we're in horror movies, but it definitely did it better than anybody else has up to this point in 2018. So you have Laurie Strode returning after 40 years. It is 40 years since the original movie. It's 20 years since H2O. It's a little weird, but 40 years since the original movie, and boy, does it work. It introduces new characters, it introduces old characters, it introduces old characters that we didn't know were old characters, and so without Dr. Loomis in the movie, you have the evil doctor in this one that sort of is trying to parade around Michael Myers and to understand him more. Where you get great motivations from that character. You have great motivations from Laurie. You have great motivations from her daughter and her granddaughter. And you have just the best soundtrack in the movie, in the series' history from John Carpenter here. Every track on this movie is an absolute banger. The Shape Stalks Allison is the best track in the movie, so I won't be taking questions on that. But this movie is amazing. It is awesome. And if not for the greatness of the top three here, this movie would be one of the best in the series. And it is one of the best in the series. Not to take that away from it, because this movie is great. This movie does everything that people wanted out of Halloween. It somehow fills the gap between the angry chuds about Halloween Kills and Halloween Ends, and then the film Twitter people that like to fight. So it somehow satisfies both of them, which is weird. That normally doesn't happen in movies, but it does happen here with Halloween 2018. It's a little weird that the third movie on the list is Halloween 3, Season of the Witch. And yes, Halloween 3 is one of the best Halloween movies. If you would have just released this movie in 1982 and called it Season of the Witch, we'd all be buying the Scream Factory Blu-ray of it, and we already all did because it's Halloween 3. You have Tom Atkins here chewing up the scenery. You have an awesome plot of Stonehenge and evil magic trying to bring back the sacrificial sort of rites of Halloween from way, way back. So you have a movie that a lot of people hate because Michael Myers isn't in it. Well, that's the idea of the whole movie, is that after Halloween 2, John Carpenter and Deborah Hill didn't want to do any more Michael Myers. That story was over. And so you go with this idea, which is an anthology about Halloween. Every year you get a different Halloween story. That's an interesting idea, and it's a great idea, because Halloween as a holiday is very weird. It's like why Trick or Treat works so well. You have all these different stories coalescing into one. And not to say that that would be the idea for any Halloween 3 sequels or Halloween anthology movies going forward, but you have this movie, and as a horror movie, as a sort of period piece of the 80s, of the early 80s particularly, it is great. It is tense. It is thrilling. Tom Atkins is great. Stacey Nelkin is great. And you just have an interesting movie that has a lot of balls, too. And it kills a kid. They murder a child in this movie. And so you don't have a lot of movies that can say that about having a kid put on a Halloween mask and have it turn their body into worms and mush and stuff like that. But this movie is great. And I love Halloween 3. And if you hate Halloween 3, I don't know what's wrong with you. Just see past the fact that Michael Myers isn't in it and that it's just an anthology Halloween movie. Because if you do, you'll be rewarded with a great, great Halloween movie. So that's why it makes it third on this list. Next up, we have number 2. You're going to guess number 1 after I say this, but we have Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers. And whereas Halloween 5 was a rush job, Halloween 4 was also a rush job, but it seems like there might have been some magic on the side of it. There was a writer's strike looming. They had a bunch of scripts that got sent in for sequels to Halloween. Mustafa Akkad wanted to bring back Michael Myers because Halloween 3 didn't do as well at the box office. Halloween 4 was a smash hit. It was a gargantuan hit for the studio, and it basically remakes the first movie in a way, but it does it in the way that remakes that are good do things. They take the original idea, you add on to it, you update it for the times, and you get Halloween 4 with an excellent, excellent performance from across the board from the cast. The cast in this movie is fantastic. They're great. Everybody does their roles perfectly. It does have a little bit of that late 80s slasheritis where some of the characters are a little overacted, but Donald Pleasance, Daniel Harris, Ellie Cornell, they're all great here. And they all add to it. And then they couldn't get Jamie Lee Curtis to come back. I think that actually aids the movie. It would have been distracting to this movie if Jamie Lee Curtis was back in it after not that long of a time. And it's weird that you see these Halloween movies that come on anniversaries from the original one. So this one is 10 years after, H2O is 20, Halloween 2018 is 40. So if the 50th anniversary of Halloween, that movie's going to kick ass whenever it comes out. But it just does everything that the first movie does well, and it adds to it. It really does. And if the series would have ended here, it would have been fine. This is another one of those cap-off points where you could have ended it. Obviously, it made a bunch of money at the box office, so they're not going to just end the movie there. But here, it would have been a fine capstone to a great series for Halloween 4, and then they went on and sort of messed it up in Halloween 5. But that's it for Halloween 4. Number 1, you could guess this, it's Halloween 1978 from John Carpenter. The slasher movie, the best slasher movie, one of the best horror movies out there, and it set the table for everything to come after it. Now, I know Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Black Christmas and a couple of others came before it, but this really refined the formula. It refined what we think about as a slasher movie. It refined what we think about as a horror movie, because you have the final girl, and I know in Black Christmas you have the final girl, and in Texas Chainsaw Massacre you do, but it really took it to a new level here. And Halloween 1978 is still the best movie in the series. It's still one of the best horror movies out there. It's still, just to this day, you can watch this movie and find new things and see new things about it that you didn't see before, that you can sort of take away from it. And it's just so simple. It's amazing in its simplicity of the plot and everything. There's no magic mumbo jumbo. It is a serial killer that was a child, escaped convict, basically, or escaped mental patient that goes on a murder spree. That's it. There's no Cult of Thorn. There's no, oh, it's a sister. There's none of that. There's no extra frilly stuff. And with these slasher movie villains, when you start adding the frilly stuff to it, you end up taking away from the character. And so while these other sequels in the Halloween movies might be great, they don't ever hold a candle to Halloween 1978, because it is just so simplistic and it's amazing for it. So that'll do it for the list. What do you think of the list? I know some of you are going to disagree with me out there. I know some people are going to hate me for having Halloween 3 at number 3, but what do you think of the list? Let me know in the comments what you think, and hopefully we get another Halloween movie sometime soon that's an original idea, or I don't know. I don't know where Halloween's going to go, because it's a very weird question, because this is a definitive ending point for the series as we know it with Laurie Strode, but as we know, there are other avenues you can explore, so we'll have to see when they do that with another Halloween movie. But as for you and me, that's it for me and the list. Thank you for watching, and Evil never dies. Maybe Evil dies tonight, who knows? But thank you for watching, and I'll see you again real soon.